Welcome back to Football Daily, where today we bring you our top 10 games that changed the football world. 10. Real Madrid v Barcelona, 1943. We're sure you were expecting El Clasico to pop up somewhere on this list, but you probably weren't expecting one from this long ago. But the biggest rivalry in world football may never have been as fierce without this 1943 matchup. That year, the two sides met in the semi-final of the Copa del Rey, known then as the Copa del Generalissimo due to General Franco's dictatorship, and Barcelona won the first leg 3-0 at home. But it was not without its controversy, as Madrid's players complained to the referee for allowing the goals to stand, while the home support whistled the Real players throughout. So, ahead of the second leg, Barcelona fans were banned from travelling to the capital, and the Merengues faithful got their own back, pelting the opposition with coins and stones as they left their hotel. Once in the stadium, Barca president Enrique Pinheiro and other board members were assaulted by a section of home supporters, while the police on hand for the game set out to goad and intimidate the Blaugrana players. Reluctant to play at all after such events, Barcelona lost the game 11-1, and a footballing rivalry suddenly became fiercely political. 9. England v Scotland, 1872. Next up, we go all the way back to one of the most important matches in football history. England's football governing body, the FA, was established in 1863, but it would be another 9 years before a seemingly simple tactical innovation would become known in the country. During this time in the sport's evolution, English sides saw dribbling with the ball as the main aspect of the game, with passing only used as a last resort, resembling rugby far more than modern-day football. Up in Scotland, however, they were already passing the ball around happily, miles ahead of their blissfully unaware southern neighbours. So, when the two sides matched up for their first official contest in 1872, the English were in for a shock. Scotland put out a side entirely made up of players from Queen's Park, the country's dominant force and the greatest purveyors of the passing game. The match ended 0-0, but England, who are a much stronger side physically, were more than matched by the tactical nous of their Scottish counterparts, who would go on to dominate in years to come. England subsequently worked on following suit with a system which made the most of the 11 players on the pitch and created a far more harmonious team game. Soon, it would be all over Europe and then transported across the globe. 8. West Germany v Hungary, 1954. In the early 1950s, the international football landscape looked very different to what it does today. Brazil was still to win their first World Cup, football clubs hadn't even begun to compete in European competition, and matches were rarely shown on television. Hungary were also the most feared team in the world, containing the legendary Ferenc Puskás and Sándor Kocsis, and notably tore England apart 6-3 at Wembley in 1953. So they were hot favourites to lift the World Cup in Switzerland the following year, and with Kocsis and Puskás on fire, were expected to sweep aside an unfancied West Germany side in the final. Germany as a country was still reeling from the Second World War, and national morale was at an all-time low, making a place in the final a rare reason for celebration. Hungary were unbeaten in 32 games and had trounced the Germans 8-3 in the group stages, so an upset looked highly unlikely, and even more so after they went 2-1 up within 10 minutes. Amazingly though, Die Mannschaft were level by the 20-minute mark, and went on to win 3-2 with a late strike from Helmut Rahn. The match went on to be known as the Miracle of Bern, and was credited with spreading a wave of euphoria and national pride which coincided with an economic boom in Germany. As a result, their national side would go on to rack up 4 World Cup victories. Hungary never got their hands on the trophy. 7. Benfica v Real Madrid, 1962. Another match involving Ferenc Puskás here, and unfortunately for fans of the Galloping Major, it's another defeat. Real Madrid completely dominated the European Cup in its early years, winning the first 5 consecutive competitions with Puskás and Alfredo Di Stefano their prized assets. Their most notable victory came in 1960, as they beat Eintracht Frankfurt 7-3 in a match still considered by many to be their greatest ever performance. But 2 years later, it was clear there were new boys on the block. Bela Gutmann's now legendary Benfica side lifted the cup in 1961, but would have to wait until 1962 to face Los Blancos for a final face-off against the world's most revered team. Puskás scored a second consecutive European Cup final hat-trick to put Madrid in control, But Benfica had their own talisman in the form of a 20-year-old Eusebio, who completed the Agrias comeback with a brace to make it 5-3 at full time. With that result, Real's dominance was truly broken, and over the next 10 years there would be 7 different winners of the tournament. 6. Arsenal v Huddersfield Town, 1930. From 2 behemoths of the European stage to 2 titans of the English game. You may not think it now, but back in the interwar years, Huddersfield were a pretty big deal, having won 3 consecutive First Division titles in the 1920s, a feat repeated only 4 times since. 2 of those championships were won under legendary coach Herbert Chapman, who left the Terriers for Arsenal in 1925. And it was in North London that the manager would become most famous, as he implemented the WM system, which challenged the status quo of the 2-3-5 formation which was used across Europe at the time. In 1930, Chapman led the Gunners out against his old team for the FA Cup final. Arsenal won 2-0 to pick up their first ever major trophy and crown victory for their manager's new system. Chapman would die 4 years later, having led the club to 2 league titles, but the WM would live on for many years in the English game. 5. Huddersfield Town v Preston North End, 1938. Sticking with the FA Cup final now as we go from tactical genius to technological innovation. Yes, you've guessed it, Huddersfield Town vs Preston was the first ever final to be broadcast live on television, although there were probably only about 17 people watching. The match itself was nothing special, as the game went on for 119 minutes with the score goalless. But it was notable for commentator Tom Woodruff saying he would eat his hat if a goal went in as the game entered the final minute of extra time. Seconds later, Preston's George Much won a penalty and put it away, and Woodruff kept his promise and ate his hat live on the BBC. Alas, it was made of marzipan. More importantly though, it marked the beginning of football on TV as we know it. The FA Cup final would be a global advert for English football for years to come, and by 2013, it was estimated that more than 500 million people worldwide watched the game. 4. Rangers v Dundee United, 1991. Up to Scotland now, and the birth of the modern era of football on the small screen. Once again, the match itself was nothing to shout about. Rangers, the dominant force in Scottish football at the time, beat Dundee United in a routine 1-0 victory. But this run-of-the-mill fixture at Ibrox was the first ever match to be shown live on Sky Sports, with the English Premier League still a year away from being born. Over the next 25 years, the television network would come to dominate coverage of British domestic and European football, and their purchase of the rights to matches ushered in the modern era of big money in the beautiful game. In 2015, the Premier League brokered an unprecedented television deal worth over £5 billion, with the rights for matches being sold for over £10 million each, adding even crazier wealth to what was already the most moneyed sports league in the world. 3. Brazil v Germany, 2014. In at 3, we have an absolute trouncing, and one that killed off the hopes and dreams of an entire nation. As you probably know, Brazil are the historic kings of the World Cup, having won the competition 5 times. But even then, they have always been scarred by their loss to neighbours Uruguay in 1950, when Brazil were the tournament hosts. That match was famous for the Brazilian media crowning the Canarinho champions before the final game, and their subsequent embarrassment has gone down in football folklore. Brazil had to wait a full 64 years to host the tournament again, and with the messianic Neymar in the team in 2014, fans were certain fate was on their side this time. And it all seemed to be going to plan. Despite not playing their best football, Brazil beats the much-fancied Chile and Colombia to reach the semi-finals, aided by Neymar's brilliance. But once there, and with their talisman out injured, they were in for a shock, as awful defending and German efficiency brought the score to 5-0 after just half an hour. The game ended 7-1 to the eventual world champions, and football's spiritual home was once again left in ruins. 2. Internazionale v Real Madrid, 1964. Back to the European Cup now, and a final which announced a new tactical system to the continent. In the 1950s and 60s, a defensive strategy known as catenaccio took Italy by storm. The system was reliant on the role of the libero, known more commonly as the sweeper, who would be stationed between the goalkeeper and the defence to clear up opposition offensives and kick off the counter-attack. The most prominent practitioner of this new style was Helenio Herrera, and he implemented it most famously at Inter Milan, stationing club captain Armando Picci as the libero. It was incredibly successful as the Nerazzurri dominated the mid-60s. In 1964, they reached their first European final and were effective in stopping and then tearing through the mighty, free-flowing Real Madrid to win 3-1 and lift the cup. They would go on to win the competition again the next season, and in the future Catenaccio would influence the likes of Jose Mourinho, among others. 1. Ajax v Internazionale 1972. But in the 1970s, Catenaccio would be killed off by the emergence of total football, a system first dreamt up by English managers Jack Reynolds and Jimmy Hogan, and later perfected by Rinus Michels while he was at Ajax. Total football is based on the idea that footballers can perform a function anywhere on the field, meaning they can cover if a player moves out of position, thus allowing for a fluid attacking style. In an Ajax team built around the masterful deep-lying forward Johan Cruyff, it worked a treat, and in 1972, it arguably had its greatest ever moment. Michels had led Ajax to their first ever European Cup before leaving for Barcelona a year earlier, but former Steaua Bucharest manager Stevan Kovac picked up where he left off. In the final this time round, the Lancieri came up against our old friends Inter Milan, and two opposing footballing philosophies came face to face. Ajax were completely dominant as Inter defended for their lives throughout. Cruyff scored twice as he began to forge his legendary status and lifted the cup as they won 2-0. Total football would then live on through the Dutch national team, Arrigo Sacchi's AC Milan in the 1980s, and Barcelona for the past 30 years. In truth, it changed football forever.
So we hope you enjoyed that, and if you want to check out more of our videos, then click here on screen. Don't forget to like and subscribe and get on our Snapchat and our Twitter.